Why would a mother be forced to hand over the child she loves more than anything to an old man? Was it the cruelty of life, or the last tiny spark of hope for a better future? But what happens after that heartbreaking decision? Does her son really get the life she dreamed of for him? Or does fate drag him into a darkness with no way out? And the biggest question of all, will this mother ever see her son again? Or will their separation become a story that never gets its ending? Come with me and listen to this incredible story. Maybe, hidden between its lines, we'll finally find the answers to all those questions and discover what really happened to that mother and her son. A long time ago, in a small village by the sea, there lived a poor widow in an old little house made of mud. Her only family was her young son. Her husband had died shortly after the boy was born, and from that day on, the child became her entire world. Every morning, she carried him with her to the beach, hoping to catch a few fish with her weak hands. Whatever she caught was barely enough to feed them for a single day. Life was simple, but painfully hard. One freezing night, the cold became unbearable. Their tiny mud house couldn't keep out the icy wind. There were no proper windows, no warm blankets, only fragile walls and a small fire burning in the corner. She held her sick little boy tightly against her chest and sat him near the fire, praying the warmth would ease his pain. But he kept coughing all night. Every breath became heavier than the last while she stayed awake, watching him with tears in her eyes and begging God to save him. It felt like the night would never end. At sunrise, nothing had changed. Like every day, she carried her son to the shore to fish. The little boy was so weak that he could barely move. His crying shattered her heart. She looked at his pale face and trembling body, and fear crept deep into her soul. What if I lose him? While she was drowning in those terrifying thoughts, she noticed a large ship slowly approaching the village. She immediately hugged her son even tighter. When the ship reached the shore, several merchants stepped off carrying food, carpets, and beautiful fabrics. The villagers rushed toward them, buying and selling as excitement filled the beach. But the poor mother stayed away from everyone. She sat quietly with her son in her arms. He was exhausted from hunger and illness. His face had turned yellow, and it looked as if life itself was slowly slipping away. One of the merchants, the oldest among them, walked over to her and gently asked, "Do you need anything?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't have any money to feed my son, or to buy medicine for him. I can't afford anything." The old merchant looked at the little boy and felt his heart break. He took out a piece of bread and tried to feed him, but the child was too weak to even eat. The man stood there thinking for a few moments. Then he spoke softly. "You can't go on like this. If things stay the same, your son won't survive." His words nearly stopped her heart. Then he continued, "I have an offer. If you're willing, give your son to me. I'll raise him, feed him, treat his illness, and give him a better life. And I'll also give you enough money to help you survive." The mother stared at him in disbelief. "Give you my son? How could I ever do that?" But then she looked back at her child, at his weak breathing, at his lifeless face. Her heart felt like it was being torn apart. She knew the painful truth. If he stayed with her, he might not live much longer. Tears streamed down her face without stopping. The old merchant looked at her with compassion and said, "If you truly love him, and you want him to have a future where he can make something of himself, then let me take him. I'll raise him like my own son. Take as much money as you need." The mother pulled her little boy close and held him as tightly as she could. "I can't give him away, no matter what. He's the only family I have left. I'd rather die than be separated from him." The merchant sighed gently before saying, "Think carefully. If he stays with you, he'll probably spend his whole life as a poor fisherman. But if he comes with me, one day he'll become a man you'll be proud of." Silence filled the air. Her voice faded into a whisper. She stood there, torn between a mother's love and her desperate wish to save her son's life. She looked into the merchant's eyes. She saw kindness. She saw sincerity. She truly believed he feared God and wanted what was best for her child. Finally, with trembling hands and a heart breaking into pieces, she placed her beloved son into the old merchant's arms. In that single moment, her whole world slipped away. The merchant placed a small bag of coins in her hand and said softly, "Take this. It'll be enough to take care of yourself for years." Her hands shook as she gripped the bag, but her eyes never left her little boy. Then the merchant smiled gently and said, "Don't worry. I'll take good care of him. And every time my ship passes through this village, I'll bring him back so you can see him." Those words gave her a tiny spark of hope, just enough to keep her standing. The merchant carried the child toward the ship. The crew finished loading their cargo, and one by one they climbed aboard. Moments later, the ship slowly sailed away, cutting through the waves. The mother stood frozen on the shore, tears filling her eyes as she watched her son disappear into the distance. She kept staring until the ship became nothing more than a tiny dot, then vanished beyond the horizon. Only one question haunted her over and over again. Did I make the biggest mistake of my life? Again and again she prayed, "Dear God, please give my son the life I could never give him. Protect him and bless him wherever he is." When night finally fell, she walked back to her little mud house with heavy, exhausted steps. She opened the door. Everything looked exactly the same. The same room, the same silence. But this time, there was no sound of her little boy. Loneliness crashed over her like a tidal wave. She dropped to her knees and burst into tears. She had nothing left. No son, no family, only memories, and a promise she prayed would one day come true. Years passed. One day, the old merchant died. After his death, his younger brother, Ibrahim, took over the business and all its responsibilities. As for the little boy his mother had tearfully given away, he had grown into a handsome young man named Abdullah. He was intelligent, wise, and incredibly talented in trade. He learned the secrets of business faster than anyone expected, and his sharp mind impressed everyone around him. Ibrahim trusted him completely and loved him as if he were his own son. But one truth remained hidden from everyone. Ibrahim had no idea that somewhere on a lonely seashore, a mother was still waiting every single day for the son she had never stopped loving. And Abdullah himself had no idea that his real mother was still alive, living alone in that same tiny mud house, praying every day that one day her son would finally come home. She slowly sank to the ground. The entire day passed. The sun set, but she never moved. On the other side of the sea, the years had taken their toll on the mother. Her body had grown weak, but her heart never gave up hope. Every single day, she walked to the shore and sat quietly, staring out at the endless horizon. Whenever she saw the waves rolling in, she'd whisper to herself, "Maybe today, maybe my son will come back." But she had no idea that Abdullah had become completely absorbed in another life, far away from the truth of his past. He knew nothing about where he came from, or that someone was still waiting for him. And so, a mother's endless hope and a son's unanswered questions became two separate stories, woven together by fate. Whenever Abdullah asked Ibrahim about his parents, there was always a strange sadness in Ibrahim's voice. "Uncle, who was my mother? Who was my father? Where did I come from?" Ibrahim would fall silent for a few moments, as though searching for an answer he didn't have. Finally, he'd say, "Abdullah, the truth is, I don't know much about your past. My older brother was the one who brought you home. I never knew where he found you or why. He was the only one who knew the whole story, but he passed away before he could tell me." A massive storm swept across the sea. Dark clouds covered the sky. The wind screamed like a wild beast. The waves rose as high as mountains. Lightning split the heavens, and thunder shook the ocean itself. It wasn't an ordinary storm. It was the kind sailors only witnessed once in many years. No merchant dared leave the harbor. Everyone knew that anyone who sailed into such a storm might never return. Days passed, then weeks, but the storm refused to end. Trade came to a complete stop. Goods began to spoil. Food supplies started running low. Both Abdullah and Ibrahim watched helplessly as their business slowly fell apart. One day, after a long silence, Abdullah finally spoke. "If we keep waiting, all our cargo will be ruined." Ibrahim let out a deep sigh. "And if we sail into that storm, we could lose our lives." Silence filled the room again. It was an impossible choice. Stay and lose everything, or sail and risk never coming back. Abdullah stared out toward the sea, lost in thought. Only one question echoed inside his mind. What should we do? Finally, he broke the silence. "If we wait any longer, we'll lose everything. We have to face the storm." Then he looked straight at Ibrahim and said firmly, "We'll put our trust in God and move forward. Either we succeed, or we lose it all. But doing nothing is the surest way to fail." Ibrahim immediately shook his head. "It's too dangerous, Abdullah. We could die." But there was something different in Abdullah's eyes. a determination that couldn't be shaken. "If you don't want to go," he said calmly, "then let me sail alone." The words hit Ibrahim like a knife. He loved Abdullah like a son. There was no way he would let him face that danger by himself. "No," Ibrahim replied instantly. "If I stay, then you stay too. I won't let you risk your life alone." But Abdullah's heart had already made its decision. It has to be done. He became known as an honest, hard-working young man. Day and night, he dedicated himself to the business. Everyone who met him admired his wisdom, kindness, and good character. Ibrahim trusted him completely and treated him like family. Together, they expanded their trading business until they owned 5 large merchant ships. They sailed from city to city and from village to village, buying and selling goods, growing richer with every journey. The sea became Abdullah's second home. Among the crashing waves and the howling wind, he found the life he loved. He mastered every trade route, every harbor, and every deal. Yet despite all his success, there was still an emptiness inside him he could never explain. Then one day, everything changed. Every time he heard those words, Abdullah quietly nodded. But the emptiness inside him only grew deeper. As the years passed, Abdullah worked alongside Ibrahim, just as the old merchant had done before.